My name is Julia, a person known for her 99% seriousness. Yet here I am, standing outside my home, accompanied only by a solitary suitcase, hastily packed with my bare essentials. Clutched tightly in my hand are two ominous envelopes. It was on the cusp of early summer, the most enchanting season of the year, when I found myself abruptly ousted from my in-laws' residence. There was no forewarning, no hint of the impending storm. Enticed by the delightful aroma drifting from the kitchen, I completed my usual morning routine and descended the stairs, eager for breakfast. The tantalizing scent promised a feast, typical of my housemate's culinary prowess. Today, it seemed, breakfast was served American style. Brimming with anticipation, I pushed open the living room door, only to be greeted not by a sumptuous meal, but by an unexpected confrontation. "Julia, you deceived us," my mother-in-law's accusing voice pierced the air as tears welled in her eyes. Her words, laden with betrayal, echoed incoherently, accusing me of treachery and shattered trust. After delivering her accusations, my mother-in-law departed, leaving behind a lingering glare heavy with resentment. Meanwhile, my father-in-law remained, his gaze burning with simmering fury. "What's going on?" It was all I could muster, my confusion mounting. I couldn't fathom why my in-laws were suddenly treating me with such hostility. Just yesterday, we were on amicable terms, much like with my own parents. As I grappled with their inexplicable behavior, my husband Ryan, who had been silently consuming his breakfast, caught my eye. "Last night," he began, explaining that he had opted to spend the night at our other residence near his workplace, leading me to believe he wouldn't be present this morning. Had he returned home late last night? Desperate for clarity, I rushed to Ryan, seeking his assistance. "What's wrong with Mom and Dad?" My words caught in my throat just as I was about to utter, "They're behaving." But my attention shifted abruptly to Ryan, whose demeanor had taken a chilling turn. His gaze pierced through me, laden with accusation and contempt, a far cry from the warmth and kindness I was accustomed to. "Ryan, how could you?" The words spilled from his lips, dripping with venom. Gone was the gentle melody of his usual speech, replaced by a harshness I had never encountered before. This was the same Ryan who would surprise me with my favorite flowers whenever his work kept us apart. "I'm sorry. I truly wish we could still travel together," he continued, his words a stark departure from the sentiments he had expressed just a week prior. With a gesture to the secretary, who stood nearby, he signaled for action. "Take care of it," he instructed, the command delivered with an air of finality. "You've finally done it, Julia, haven't you?" His accusation hung heavy in the air, stabbing at my core. "Married me for the money, didn't you?" "What? You've taken my mother's money," I protested, disbelief lacing my words. "Wait, that's not true." The accusation hung heavy in the air, the enormity of the alleged sum sinking in. "And now you're trying to justify it." My father-in-law's voice was laced with scorn. "What? What on earth are you talking about, Dad? I swear, I didn't touch a penny of her money. Get out of this house." "Dad, what's happening?" I pleaded desperately for clarity, but received only a curt denial in response. It seemed I was being accused of embezzling a significant amount from my mother-in-law, a notion utterly unfounded in reality. I begged for understanding, for someone to believe me, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. A chill ran down my spine as the secretary reappeared, clutching a suitcase, likely containing my belongings. "Please, Ryan, listen to me," I implored, but he shook his head with a disappointed expression, as though delivering lines in a tragic play. He was convinced of my guilt. "These are the divorce papers," he stated matter-of-factly, thrusting them towards me. "Once you've signed them, send them back to me." "What? Why?" I exclaimed, my voice trembling with disbelief. "I can't live with someone solely interested in a family inheritance. It's the family's decision." Ryan's words cut through the air like icicles, sending shivers down my spine. "Now, leave. It's not fair. I haven't done anything," I protested vehemently, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Ryan's demeanor remained stoic as he commanded his secretary, "Ensure she never returns to this property." "What? What's happening?" "Stop." I struggled against the secretary's firm grip as he forcibly escorted me out, my suitcase in tow, tears streaming down my face, mingling with the tumult of emotions swirling within me. Coming from humble beginnings, I knew the allure of wealth, but I was never one to resort to deceit. The grandeur of the mansion felt like a cruel contrast as I was unceremoniously ejected onto the street, barely half an hour after waking. Was this a nightmare? My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the surreal turn of events. Amidst the chaos, the imposing door slammed shut mercilessly. Just before it sealed me off completely, the secretary thrust another envelope into my hand, a final act of cruelty. "This is also from Mr. Ryan. Please take it," the secretary's voice broke through the tense silence. With a finality that matched the closing of the door, the lock clicked shut, sealing my fate. With trembling hands, I peered into the envelope, my heart sinking as I beheld its contents. A severance payment of $10,000. I had married Ryan 3 years prior, finding employment as an advisory accountant at the company where my father-in-law held the reins as CEO. Despite just passing my CPA exam, I was relegated to a subordinate role, more of an assistant to my colleagues out of pity. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. The pieces of the puzzle began to align in a way that didn't make sense. Something was amiss. Driven by a desire to prove myself as a competent CPA, I had delved into a task assigned to a colleague, only to uncover a web of deceit. My colleague had been manipulating the books, siphoning off hundreds of thousands of dollars. In that moment, a mixture of exhilaration and dread coursed through me. Yet I knew I couldn't turn a blind eye to such wrongdoing. Summoning my courage, I made the difficult decision to report the fraud to my father-in-law, the CEO. As someone deeply committed to honesty and integrity, turning a blind eye was never an option for me. Though the thought of reporting the fraud to the IRS crossed my mind, I hesitated. After all, such a drastic action would strip my colleague of their CPA status, a consequence I found difficult to reconcile with, especially after my own hard-won journey to becoming a CPA. My father-in-law, a shrewd businessman who had amassed a considerable fortune in a single generation, had been unwittingly targeted. "Thank you, Julia. We're indebted to you. Without your intervention, who knows how long they would have continued siphoning off funds," my father-in-law expressed his gratitude, his wife echoing his sentiments. I found myself celebrated as a hero, as if I had single-handedly saved the day. "Julia, if you're not involved with anyone at the moment, would you consider marrying our son?" The proposition caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but wonder if such flattery was commonplace among the wealthy. Though I laughed it off at the time, little did I know that my father-in-law's suggestion held genuine weight. Before I knew it, I found myself being introduced to their son, a man who praised me for safeguarding the family's assets. Bathed in their praise, I couldn't help but feel a sense of validation. After years of being criticized for my seriousness, it seemed that living authentically and earnestly had finally paid off. And in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of happiness. As a trainee CPA, I had never imagined ascending to the role of official advisory accountant, let alone being appointed as personal secretary to Ryan, the CEO's son. Ryan embodied the archetype of privilege, perpetually optimistic with a laissez-faire attitude that initially grated on my meticulous nature. Yet, amidst his dependency on me, I discovered a sense of fulfillment in aiding him. "Ryan, you really need to leave for the business meeting soon," I reminded him, checking my watch. "I'll manage just fine. You should get going." "Are you sure you won't stress out the driver this time?" he teased, flashing a charming smile. "I've got everything under control," I assured him, ushering him towards the door. Perhaps he appreciated my attention to detail more than I had realized. Our relationship evolved from professional to romantic, much to the delight of my father-in-law, who had harbored hopes of our union. The wedding was met with resounding approval, and for 3 years, the dynamics between Ryan, myself, and my in-laws remained largely unchanged. The most significant shift came with my father-in-law's decision to pass the company's reins to Ryan. As preparations for his ascent to the boardroom accelerated, my mother-in-law and I found ourselves immersed in a whirlwind of meetings and social engagements. Tonight was meant to be no exception, with a business partner's anniversary party on the agenda. Instead, I found myself alone in a sterile hotel room, a stark departure from the anticipated festivities. In the heat of anger and frustration, the thought of retreating to my parents' home briefly crossed my mind. But the notion didn't sit right with me. If Ryan wanted a divorce, so be it. But as someone who prides herself on honesty and sincerity, leaving under a cloud of suspicion was unthinkable. Seated on the bed, I revisited the contents of the envelope, divorce papers, and a severance payment. Despite the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me, I fought to maintain composure. I needed clarity. With a steadying breath, I closed my eyes and reaffirmed to myself, I haven't taken a penny of my mother-in-law's money. That's a fact. If not me, then who? The rush of excitement and fear surged once more. Gathering the bundle of $10,000, I resolved to make good use of it. After a quick touch-up of my makeup, I made my way to the private detective's office. A week later, my phone rang. We have the results of the investigation. I arrived at the office, greeted by a stack of papers on the reception table. The report, thicker than anticipated, sent a shiver down my spine as I flipped through its contents, my hands trembling with anticipation. What? Huh? Each revelation in the report left me reeling, my head spinning as I absorbed the shocking truth. Exiting the building, I was greeted by an unpleasantly brisk breeze, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within me. Collapsing beneath the shade of a nearby street tree, I grappled with the weight of the newfound knowledge. Passers-by cast curious glances my way, oblivious to the internal battle raging within me. With resolve coursing through my veins, I made my way to my in-laws' home, determined to confront them. Why was she allowed inside? My father-in-law demanded, his voice laced with disdain as he berated the maid. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, presenting the signed divorce papers. I've brought these, I stated firmly. You instructed me to mail them. If you seek a divorce, I won't stand in your way. But I refuse to be labeled a thief, I continued, my voice unwavering. Snatching the papers from my grasp, my father-in-law turned to leave. But I refused to let him go without a final declaration. I demand an apology from all of you, I asserted, my words echoing through the room. If you're unwilling to acknowledge your wrongdoing, I'm prepared to pursue this matter in court. As the prospect of legal action loomed, my father-in-law halted in his tracks. I was pleased when you accepted me, despite my humble background. I held genuine affection for you and your mother-in-law, he confessed, his voice tinged with remorse. Summoning my courage, I drew in a deep breath, my fists clenched at my sides. Then, with a measured exhale, I spoke. I'm telling you, I'm innocent. Do you understand? Let me be clear. I didn't do anything, I reiterated, striving to maintain composure. What? What do you mean? I didn't. My mother-in-law's voice, seemingly emerging from the shadows, pierced the tense atmosphere with confusion etched across her features. I mean exactly what I said, I affirmed, extracting the investigation report from my bag and passing it to her. Please take a look. What? What's this? What's going on? Their eyes widened as they devoured the contents of the report, their expressions teetering on the brink of disbelief. The person responsible for stealing my mother-in-law's money, it was Ryan, I revealed, the weight of the truth heavy in my words. Before our marriage, Ryan had developed a reckless habit of overspending. He used to justify it by saying, "We have enough family wealth to live extravagantly for a lifetime." He indulged in frequent trips abroad, particularly enjoying gambling, often wagering hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. Even his own parents had grown increasingly concerned, implementing measures to curb his access to their funds. They admonished Ryan, urging him to earn his own income. However, old habits die hard, and Ryan, consumed by his penchant for extravagance, sought out alternative means to sustain his lifestyle. That's when he concocted the embezzlement scheme that I ultimately uncovered. Ryan had manipulated my former colleague, who served as my father-in-law's accounting consultant, into falsifying the books. Mistakenly attributing the embezzlement solely to my former colleague, I reported it to my father-in-law without probing deeper, never uncovering the true mastermind. In reality, all the embezzled funds were lining Ryan's pockets. When the truth about my former colleague's embezzlement came to light, Ryan and his parents expressed gratitude towards me, but beneath their facade of appreciation, I sensed a simmering resentment. Was there a romantic involvement between the accountant and Ryan? It seems more like an affair, doesn't it? After all, she was married at the time, someone speculated. Nevertheless, Ryan professed his love for her, convincing her to embezzle funds for their future together. Another voice chimed in. As a consequence of her actions, my former colleague was terminated from her position and faced divorce from her husband, who had reached his breaking point. Despite obediently complying with Ryan's selfish request to keep his involvement under wraps, he ultimately wedded me. His persuasion tactic was clear: distract his parents by marrying a financially prudent partner like myself. thereby easing their suspicions and enabling him to continue his scheming. And indeed, his plan unfolded seamlessly. With my reputation for uncovering discrepancies, my in-laws relaxed their vigilance regarding Ryan's extravagant spending simply because I was his wife. "Mother-in-law, why did you believe I stole your money?" I questioned, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Ryan told me he entrusted you with my card, Julia," she confessed, avoiding my gaze. I felt a pang of betrayal as her words sank in. "Ryan, he's been taking his responsibilities seriously lately, and I thought there might be occasions where it wouldn't be convenient to pay in cash, so I allowed him to carry my credit card. But then he said, I mustn't use it recklessly, so I'll have Julia manage it. And so, Her voice trailed off, her expression clouded with regret. "So, because of that, I was accused of theft," I interjected bitterly. Just to clarify, Ryan never mentioned any of this to me. Caught off guard by the realization of her son's deception, my mother-in-law's features fell slack with disbelief. "By the way, mother-in-law, have you read about what your stolen money was used for?" I pressed, seeking to redirect the conversation. I don't understand anything anymore," she admitted, her voice laden with confusion and distress. My mother-in-law's voice trembled, barely audible over the weight of her emotions as tears welled up in her eyes. I returned the report to them, bracing myself for their reaction. "The purchase of a condominium," my mother-in-law murmured, her voice laden with disbelief. "Let me see that," my father-in-law interjected, his brows furrowed in confusion. "But Ryan already has another house near his office. Why would he buy a condo for the senior accountant?" It's becoming clear now. Ryan has been entangled with her all along. Lately, he's been spending an unusual amount of time at the other house, likely staying with her. Ryan has always been with that woman. He loved her more than he ever loved me, Julia, my mother-in-law confessed, her words heavy with heartbreak. I remained composed, devoid of emotion, having already processed the nauseating contents of the report countless times before this moment. It appears Ryan has been indulging in quite the affair with the senior accountant. They even frequent underground casinos. I added matter-of-factly. "Underground casinos? Please take a look at the last page," my mother-in-law urged, a glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. My father-in-law frantically flipped through the pages of the report, his brows furrowed in concern. "What's this staggering amount?" he exclaimed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "He's deeply involved with the underground casino. It seems he'll be grappling with debt for the foreseeable future," I explained solemnly. "Underground casino." My father-in-law's voice trailed off as he sank to the floor, overcome with shock. "Just to be certain, none of our other cards have been compromised, correct?" I inquired, prompting my father-in-law into action. "Ha!" His eyes widened in realization as he rushed to the nearest telephone, panic evident in his movements. "Stop everything. Cancel that card immediately." His urgent command reverberated throughout the house. Later, I received a formal apology from my in-laws. They expressed regret for concealing their son's extravagant spending and his affair. While I appreciated their honesty, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Their apology seemed incomplete without addressing the hurt they caused me. Nevertheless, I handed them the completed divorce papers. With a small nod, I began to gather my belongings, ready to leave. But as they pleaded for me to stay, their sudden change in demeanor caught me off guard. Just a week ago, they had treated me like a criminal. "I'm sorry, but isn't it a bit late for that?" I interrupted, my voice tinged with frustration. "I loved you both and considered you family, but you disregarded my feelings and opinions. Do you have any idea how hurtful that was for me?" Despite my efforts to remain composed, a solitary tear betrayed my emotions, quickly followed by a cascade of tears streaming down my cheeks. "Julia." The divorce papers lay before us, a stark reminder of the irreparable rift between us. "This divorce is what your son desires. Shouldn't we respect his wishes?" It was evident that he had moved on with someone else. After composing myself and injecting a final touch of sarcasm, an abrupt alarm pierced the silence, jolting us all. Startled by the sudden noise, I furrowed my brow in confusion, only to have my father-in-law grasp my wrist urgently. "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing?" I questioned, taken aback by his sudden urgency. "You should come too, honey," he insisted, leading me outside to the garden. There, the gate that had shut me out just a week ago stood before us, and we heard a voice from the other side. "Hey, the gate won't open. Is anyone home?" Ryan's frustrated voice echoed through the gate, followed by the sound of him banging on it vigorously. What's happening? My car won't start either. This is ridiculous. Ryan's frustration was palpable as the annoying alarm persisted, refusing to cease its blaring. Listen closely, Ryan, my father-in-law began, his tone firm and unwavering. Huh? Dad, can you hear me? My key isn't working. Can you unlock it from your side? Ryan's voice crackled through the intercom, tinged with confusion. I told you to listen, Ryan, my father-in-law's voice boomed over the intercom. What? What's going on? Ryan's tone faltered, sensing the shift in his father's demeanor. You have no right to open this gate, my father-in-law declared firmly. What? Why would you say that? Ryan's voice rose in disbelief. Isn't it obvious? I didn't think you could be so oblivious. We're aware of everything. All of it, my father-in-law continued, his voice unwavering. Is Mom there too? Ryan's voice trembled with uncertainty. Ryan, Julia meant the world to us, but you're a different story. We want nothing to do with you ever again, my father-in-law declared resolutely. What? What's happening? Mom, are you there? Please say something, Ryan pleaded desperately. We know that you framed Julia. We know about the embezzlement. We know about your affair and your debts. We know everything, my father-in-law stated, his voice filled with conviction. Wait a minute, where did you get such absurd ideas? Stop spreading lies. Ryan's voice cracked with indignation. Ryan's frantic protests continued, but to no avail. Anxiety gnawed at me as I wondered if his parents would be swayed by his words and doubt me once again. However, my fears were unfounded. I trust Julia. So do I, Dad, his mother interjected firmly. Mom, Ryan's voice wavered, betraying his disbelief. We sincerely apologize. Julia, would you please consider taking my position? His father implored. What? Hey, is Julia there too? Ryan's voice erupted in anger, reverberating through the air. He seemed to be causing quite a commotion. However, his resistance was short-lived as security personnel arrived to calm him down. In the end, I agreed to my father-in-law's proposal, but with one condition: I will always be honest. Can you trust me unconditionally? They both nodded solemnly. A year later. Do you really think I'm cut out for this executive role? I hesitated, lingering in front of the executive office door. My father-in-law gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Despite my divorce from Ryan, I still addressed the CEO as Dad, as we had mutually agreed upon. Julia, what our company truly needs is someone with your integrity and sincerity. It's a perfect fit for you, don't you think? He offered, his smile warm and encouraging. However, I couldn't resist a slightly mischievous question. Do you ever regret letting Ryan go? He should be the one stepping into this role, shouldn't he? Since the incident, my in-laws had distanced themselves from Ryan. Initially, he would often come pleading for financial assistance, but once he realized they wouldn't comply, he stopped. The son who had vanished under the weight of enormous debt. I wondered if he was still with that senior. Ryan let out a small, lonely sigh, but Ryan isn't the one meant for this position. The responsibility was too much for him. We're the ones to blame for indulging him too much, my father-in-law admitted. Dad, I murmured sympathetically. Hey, don't look so disheartened. Stand tall and proud, he encouraged. Yes, I replied with newfound determination, reaching for the handle of the executive office door. As it swung open effortlessly, I stepped inside, ready to embrace my new role.
If the ownership of this house isn't transferred to me, I'm contemplating divorce. I was taken aback when my husband suddenly dropped this bombshell. This house holds precious memories of our family, and I can't bring myself to let it go. However, my husband is threatening me, playing with my emotions. Distraught, I reached out to my father for help. My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old, a full-time housewife, dedicating my days to supporting my family through household chores. I married John 2 years ago, quitting my job to support our life together. My husband worked hard for us, but since my father-in-law's passing, my mother-in-law moved in, disrupting our peaceful life completely. Surprisingly, I learned about my mother-in-law's move only the day before it happened. When my husband came home, he casually mentioned it as if it were a natural thing. Huh, this is so sudden. Your mother is coming over to visit tomorrow. I asked. No, she's not coming to visit. She's moving in. so please prepare and clean up, he replied. In retrospect, I felt something was off about my husband's decision-making. Normally, such decisions should be discussed with his wife beforehand. However, in my case, the decision had already been made without my knowledge. The next day, my mother-in-law arrived with a lot of luggage, ready to move into our house. It's been a while. I'm glad you look well, Mary. Please come in, I greeted her. Strangely, she seemed displeased. Emily, why didn't you come pick me up? Isn't it common sense to meet at the station when your mother-in-law is coming, especially when I'm carrying big luggage? She complained. I explained that I didn't know her arrival time, but she retorted that I should have contacted her, labeling me as thoughtless. From that day on, my mother-in-law's snide comments intensified. As soon as my husband left for work, the barrage began. Emily, why are you sitting there? Do the dishes. You should have finished the laundry in the morning. That's common knowledge. I apologized and promised to do the laundry after the dishes. However, her comments continued, criticizing my priorities and claiming that in her house, there's a rule to do laundry immediately after breakfast, dismissing any excuses. I maintain my own daily routine. Why can't Mary understand that I'm not refusing to do the work? It seems she just can't accept my way of doing things. Even if I did things her way, she would still find fault and complain every day. The daytime hours alone with her were especially challenging. One day, I had an epiphany on how to end this living hell with my mother-in-law. Move to the house I inherited from my father and live in a separate home from her. My father retired early a few months ago, and as a result, my parents started a new life in the countryside. They then passed on their house to me. Fortunately, that house isn't too far from our current apartment, and we were planning to move eventually. Living with my mother-in-law has reached my limits, so I decided to talk to my husband about moving sooner. John, can we talk for a moment? I asked. He inquired, what's up? Anything happened? I brought up the house my father gave us and suggested moving there. Oh, that house. We did talk about moving there someday. Why the sudden decision? He wondered. I explained, well, I've been having some difficulties with your mother. I can't bear living with her anymore, so I'm seriously considering moving. Surprisingly, my husband agreed to the move. After informing Mary, we decided to move a week later. I thought she would oppose, but she accepted our decision with a big smile. Goodbye, John and Emily. I'm so sorry for the sudden decision to move, she said. We reassured her, don't worry about it. It's wonderful that your father gave you the house. He's very sweet. Thank you. Please visit us sometime. She promised to visit, and we headed to our new home. I felt relieved. I wouldn't have to hear snide remarks from her anymore. From now on, I could live freely at my own pace. Although I thought she might oppose, I'm glad I consulted John. However, my peace did not last. While I could keep a distance from my mother-in-law and reduce stress, my husband started coming home late. It wasn't just late returns. There were days when he wouldn't come home at all. He was visiting his mother, defending his actions by saying he was worried about her. It became too frequent, disrupting my daily life. One day, I realized this couldn't go on. I sat him down for a talk. John, you've been coming home really late lately, and sometimes you don't even come home at all. Is that so? I'm just worried about my mother, he replied. That's not the point. At least let me know beforehand that you'll be late so I'll know I don't have to prepare dinner. Since you're a housewife and always at home, you can eat the leftovers for lunch the next day, right? So you're saying I should just accept everything quietly because I'm a housewife? Are you saying we shouldn't talk about this? Isn't that the truth? Housewives just relax at home, right? What? What are you saying? Anyway, I'm worried about leaving my mother alone. Ellie will be coming back soon, and I need to discuss some things with her. Wait, Ellie is coming back. Ellie is John's sister who currently lives abroad for work. It was the first time I heard she's coming back, but what does he need to discuss with her? Curious, I asked my husband. We're moving Ellie here to live with us. What? Live together? Yes, she kept saying she wanted a big house like the one she lived abroad. That's why I thought of letting her stay in this house. I don't understand. Suddenly informed of this, I couldn't think of anything. Is my sister-in-law going to live in this house? I was just able to escape Mary's bickering, and now his sister. Wait a minute. Why is Ellie going to live in this house? This is the house that I inherited from my father. It's unnatural. This is the only big house that would satisfy Ellie. The apartment where we used to live is now where my mother stays, and it's too small for 4 people. Don't just decide on your own. I never intended to live with Ellie. Oh, I don't plan to live together either. I intend to give this house to Ellie. What? Why? Because we plan to move back with my mother. Ellie can use this house freely. I was taken aback by my husband's unreasonable proposal and felt like fainting. Despite my repeated insistence that I had no intention of living with my mother-in-law, my husband eventually became furious. Can't you be a little more considerate? You can live because of me, so just do as I say. Enough is enough. Enough of your jokes. This house is precious to me, inherited from my father. Why should I give it to Ellie? Such a wonderful house is wasted on you, isn't it? I've already told Ellie that I've got her a large house. It's too late to say otherwise now. I wasn't consulted in any of this decision. Either way, I can't accept it. You're always complaining. Enough. Calm down and think. I'll go back to my mother's for a while. My husband angrily slammed the door and left. Left alone in the room, tears streamed down my face. I couldn't understand why my husband decided everything on his own. It's unimaginable that he intends to give away the house. I inherited my father's house, but my husband insisted on giving it to my sister-in-law, Ellie. Every day, he bombarded me with messages, asking if I had calmed down and urging me to come back soon. Each time, I had to firmly tell him that I had no intention of agreeing. Then, one day, he sent a message that read, "Hey, Emily, when will you come here and live with me? Stop nagging. I've said it so many times. I have no intention of living with Mary, moving there, and giving this house to Ellie. I've already told Ellie, stop being selfish. She might be coming back this week, so there's no time. Why should I give up my house for your family? I inherited this house from my father. Don't decide on your own. Who do you think you're talking to? Even my mother is furious. I'm at my wit's end. That's not my problem. You're ignoring my feelings." My husband let out a big sigh over the phone, clearly frustrated. Then he said something shocking. "If you can't listen to me, then let's divorce. Hand over the house to Ellie. Leave by tomorrow." At that moment, my love for my husband quickly faded. Threatening me with the word divorce was utterly despicable, and I couldn't possibly forgive him. To use divorce as a threat without considering someone's feelings was unacceptable. I couldn't let these people have their way. As I burned with anger, my husband continued to speak with a triumphant and dominating tone. "Listen, if you don't leave by tomorrow, I'll really divorce you. Got it?" "Wait, are you serious?" I asked, shocked. "Of course I am. You don't have a choice. What will you do if you, a housewife, get divorced? You can't survive." "Enough, I get it." "Good. Hurry up and move over here. My mother is looking forward to disciplining you." He hung up the phone with a confident tone, thinking I would do as he said. After that call, I made up my mind and decided to seek help from my father for a plan. The next day came, and I calmly replied, "Yes, everything's ready," when asked about the move. Curious about Ellie's return, my husband inquired, "By the way, I'm curious about when Ellie will be back." "She'll be back tomorrow. Why are you so obsessed with Ellie? Between you and me, she seems to have made a lot from stock investments. I see, so if you provide her with the house, maybe you can ask for financial help. That's so like you. Anyway, you need to leave that house today. It's inconvenient for all of us. Don't worry." "I've already moved," I said calmly. "What? What do you mean?" My husband seemed genuinely surprised. "I knew it. You don't want to divorce me, do you? Naturally. Without an income, you can't survive. But all of this is coming to an end. We're still married now, so that's why we're talking." "Wait, what? I can only think about divorce now. My husband was clearly shaken by my words. You promised to move out of that house, right? And live with me? But you've already moved. What are you saying? Of course, I won't live in a house with a husband who decides everything on his own and a bullying mother-in-law. Huh. Why are you including me? You promised to move out for Ellie. I said I've already moved, didn't I? I did as you said. Enough with the jokes. Where are you now? My husband's tone was panicky, and he was clearly losing his cool. Actually, I'm at my parents' house. Why did I move to my parents' rural home? I don't plan on returning to where you guys are, I declared to my husband. He replied with a hint of relief in his voice. You should have told me that sooner. If I could just give that house to Ellie, it doesn't matter where you live. It would require $3,300,000, he explained. $3,300,000? What? I exclaimed. I put the house I got from my father up for sale. So if you really want to give it to Ellie, buy it for $3,300,000 and then hand it over, he calmly stated. What? Are you joking? I'm serious, he insisted. The house was still in my father's name, so I asked him to sell it. In reality, what I asked my father for was to sell the house. My father had always said, if something happens, contact me. You can live or sell this house as you like. I'll help you. As a result of the valuation, a price of $3,300,000 was proposed, which I gladly agreed to and put the house on the market immediately. My husband probably never saw this coming. Consumed with anger, he spat out insults. Why are you doing this without asking me? This is unforgivable. Dan, I retorted. I'm not asking for nor do I need your approval. We're getting divorced soon anyway. I don't care. Do you understand your position? You'll be the one in trouble if we divorce since you don't have an income. You're just a housewife. I'd rather struggle on my own than be with you forever. Listen, Ellie will be coming back soon. I told you, I'm relying on Ellie's money, didn't I? So, what? Like I said, if you want to let dear Ellie live in that house, just buy it for $3,300,000. That is if you can. What? That's impossible. If Ellie has made a lot of money from her investments, I don't see why she can't afford it. I don't know how much she made, but that's too much. She can never afford it, my husband insisted, maintaining his domineering attitude. I felt it was foolish to spend any more time on him and unleashed everything I wanted to say. I'm done with you and this ridiculous mess. Did you think threatening divorce would make me give up the house? If you thought being a housewife meant I'd do whatever you say, you're so wrong. Hey, let's calm down and talk. I am calm. Isn't it you who's panicking? I won't be controlled by you or your family anymore. Stay out of my life. Go to hell with your beloved mother, you mama's boy. I shouted loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, then abruptly hung up the phone. Of course, I'd had enough of these insane calls from my husband, so I blocked his number. I immediately consulted my lawyer and decided to request a divorce. It took some time, but the divorce was finalized, recognizing my husband's fault. He and Mary still live in that apartment. As for Ellie, they couldn't provide the large house she wanted, and she was furious, claiming this wasn't the deal and made a U-turn back overseas. My ex-husband's plan to seek financial assistance from his successful sister fell through. Now, he seems to be struggling financially, having to pay me alimony and support his mother. As long as he continues to live with such a selfish mother, his life will never be prosperous. On the other hand, I've moved to the countryside and am enjoying peaceful days with my parents. I recently started a clerical job at a small company introduced by a neighbor. With that salary, I can live comfortably. I plan to live here for a while. I want to be by my parents' side as much as possible to